Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
And welcome everyone to the final edition of the MMA Outsiders for 2022. Yeah, you're not seeing things. There is no episode number this time. Why? Because this is a look back. This is a special edition where Zain and I here will be looking back at all the moments that made 2022 in this wild and crazy sport that we call mixed martial arts. That's Zain Bando, I'm Tom Albano, and we are going to run through several awards today. We have plenty of awards to discuss and talk about. Some of these awards, Zain and I have the same opinion for. Some it's different. It's probably the same for you guys out there, that we're going to say things that are going to make you scratch your head or nod your head in agreement. We'll run through all of that. We have little end-of-year games to give some predictions for 2023 before 2023 even hits. Yes, as I said last week, we do have the Bellator Rising card that's coming up, but we'll be off next week as Zain's going to be going to a big bowl game for Illinois, and I'll be getting back into the work swing of things. So next week's a bit of an off week, and then the week afterwards, we'll come back. We'll discuss that Bellator Rising card, and we'll preview the UFC. But as always, yes, even though it is a special edition, we got to still do this thing as always. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Ring the notification bell so you get notified of everything here on the Empty the Bench Network. Obviously, we are going through most shows are going through their best ofs right now. ETB, Empty the Bench, Beyond the Bench, Game On, and now this is, I guess, in that category, this is our little best of. Obviously, not a clip show, but more of a look back for us. That's Zain Bando. You can find his work over at bjpen.com. And on Tom Albano, you can find my work over at Fansided MMA. So, Zain, a lot we got to roll through with these awards.
Yeah, a lot we have to roll through, and we've only had this podcast for a really short amount of time, and it seems like even in the short amount of time that we've done this together, it just seems like a whole lot has happened, and it'll just be interesting to go through everything with you, just because, it's just been a wild year where it seems like the fights and the madness of the sport just continue to keep coming at us, and it kind of went in all different directions. And honestly, with the craziness of this year, we've also kind of seen the evolution of this show grow along with it. So it'll be nice to put a bow on everything. And as you said before, we have a lot of awards to get to, and a lot of awards that, for those of you who are familiar with MMA awards and how they work, a lot of these are going to be second nature to you. For some of you that are new to the sport or new to this podcast, we'll do our best to break it down in the easiest way possible. But so you guys know, this is an award show. So if you haven't watched some of these fights, we apologize for the spoilers in advance. But I guess this will also encourage some of you who haven't seen some of these fights as you go back and see them, because they were pretty entertaining as well.
I didn't realize I was muted. But Zain, we're going to start on a very interesting note here. We're going to start with what's called the 2022 most gruesome injury of the year. Yeah, what a first award to start with. And Zain, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first. So we have to go back to July of this year, UFC London. It was their second installment. Main event, Curtis Blades versus Tom Aspinall. Ended up in a real freak accident for Tom Aspinall, losing the fight due to a very gruesome injury as to where he tore his ACL, and it forced the fight to be called pretty much right away. So that is my pick for most gruesome injury of the year. And it was also in a stretch where we had back-to-back main events in a 2-week span and injuries. That was the second one. The week before that was Yara Rodriguez and Brian Ortega. So when it comes to injuries, that is just one of many that made us cringe a little bit. But that is my pick. Tom, what is yours?
Okay, before we get to my Zen, I gotta say, and I said it several weeks back. I think it was around September when we had another one of these. But it seemed like 2022, Zan, we had more cases of main event matches ending in absolute disappointment because of injury TKOs. This year was cursed in that regard.
Oh, for sure, especially with the amount of big fights that it took place in. It was kind of shocking to see it happen on such a frequent basis. So, yeah, I'm totally with you.
My pick, actually, Zan, we don't have to stretch too far back. Just a couple of weeks ago at UFC Vegas 66. If you remember, it was Rafa Garcia taking on Hayasir Mehishate. It was on the undercard. Garcia got the win, but Garcia actually took a blow to the head. And that blow into the head, he was pretty bloodied up. And as it turns out, cut an artery, Zan. Supposedly he lost like 20% of his blood. And in the post-fight footage, you actually see him in the trainer's room, and you could just see the blood slowly but surely trickling out of his head. It looked absolutely... If you are not a fan of blood, if you cringe or want to hurl at the sight of blood, if you see the injury and the aftermath, you are going to...
Yeah,
you better have a bucket nearby.
Yeah, you don't want to. You don't want to see that. I wanted to correct myself on Tom Aspinall's injury. There was some ACL damage done, but the tear actually took place in the MCL. So I wanted to correct that really quick. But again, as we both alluded to, two very, very nasty injuries that had major impacts on all four fighters involved. And yeah, as you said, a very weird year for injuries, and a year where injuries just seem to happen far too often and far too much in the biggest spot on the card.
For sure. All right, our next award, then, is the 2022 Coach and Gym of the Year award. This is given to the coach or the fight camp that had the most significant amount of success with its fighters this year. And then, kind of like what we mentioned last couple of weeks, this honestly should be James Krause and Glory MMA, but James Krause, within the span of about a month, managed to take his stock and his gym from up here all the way down here with his controversy, which we're actually going to discuss in a little bit, to the point where Krause has had to sell the gym, and Krause is in a whole shroud of controversy that kind of ruins his reputation and a bit of his legacy. So, Zan, I went into a different direction with this one, but I think this is actually one where you and I agreed. So, Fansided did its awards, and it agreed with Coach Khabib winning the award. Now, Khabib has said in comments that credit should then also be given, and more than just to him, to Javier Mendez, his coach, his longtime coach, his coach over at the American Kickboxing Academy. And yeah, that's going to be my pick. It's going to be Khabib, Javier Mendez, and AKA the American Kickboxing Academy for Coach of the Year. Like I said, I would have given it to Glory and James Krause, but for circumstances we have talked about, and we'll talk about again later.
Yeah, I think we're unanimous here. I agree with you. AKA has had some tremendous fighters come out of that gym. Obviously, as you know, Daniel Cormier, Khabib, Islam Makhachev. Now, it's hard to deny that some of the best talent in the sport, if not the best talent in the sport, is coming out of that gym. And even with the whole James Krause situation, even if none of that did happen, I think I would have still picked AKA. That's how impressive they were this year, and that's how impressive they've been over the last several years now. So yes, both of our predictions or picks for this award, definitely you have to give a shout out to AKA, and it'll probably be for several years running until some newer gyms kind of enter the pipeline. But it seems like we're entering into this different era of just these newer gyms that aren't getting, the publicity that maybe like Jackson's got back in the day, or Militant Fighting Systems or something like that. Now you're really seeing AKA kind of take over, and yeah, this is a unanimous pick from both of us. So a shout out to everyone in San Jose. That's easily the best gym in the world, and no surprise on both of our fronts.
Next award is going to be the Who to Watch For in 2023, which is kind of, it speaks for itself. The fighter that we think is somebody who is going to probably, I'm not sure if I should say have the big rise because it might, be learning experience, but somebody who you might want to keep an eye on, whether it's for an entertainment standpoint or a fighter standpoint, fighter stock. Zain, who did you pick?
This is going to be a bit of a hot one, and I'm sure many of you watching this who follow this sport would agree. But I actually am really on the Raul Rosas Jr. hype train. I really do think that this is someone that I think people need to pay attention to. You don't see very many 17 and 18-year-olds come into the UFC and absolutely dominate in their debut like that. Let alone even on the Contender Series. It's very interesting to see already the amount of praise he's gotten from the fans and the media. And as you and I have alluded to for the last several weeks, if this guy can get built the right way and is built by star power and stardom, and they start to, put him in fights, in big time places like MSG and Vegas still, and the Forum in Los Angeles, if he can continue to get on these big cards, either as on a pay-per-view headlining a fight night or one of the main attractions on a fight night, I think you're going to see this kid resonate with a lot of people who are his age, who may be inspired, who may want to do MMA as a career. I think he just is a brand new trailblazer for a new era, similar to what Ronda Rousey is for women's MMA, and awfully similar to what some of the legends that we think of pound for pound who have transcended the sport, like Anderson Silva, GSP, John Jones, and what have you. I think that with the right build, Rosas Jr. can get to that level and maintain sustained success for a long time. It's just going to be how the UFC pushes him, and I'm very excited to see where he goes, because I think you're going to see a lot. Or my prediction is 3 to 4 appearances next year for the young kid, if you will. So I like him very much.
I definitely like Raul Rosas Jr. as well. He was not my pick, however, my pick. You guys have followed the show. If you have followed the show over the last few weeks specifically, I think you know in the direction that I'm going to go in. Yes, he's a ranked UFC fighter, but he's kind of on the low end, and he's somebody who's going to be guaranteed to get some big fights next year, following his victory over Darren Till at UFC 282, and that is DDP Dricus du Plessis. Definitely somebody who has shown he's got the personality, he's got the fighting spirit. Yeah, he definitely had some issues that were shown in that fight with Till, in which he seemed to be a little low on energy entering that second round, and he kind of paid a little bit of a price for it. He's got to definitely manage his breathing a little bit better, although he has talked about how he definitely does not breathe like the normal MMA fighter. But he definitely is going to be owed some big fights, and you're going to see a couple of appearances from him next year, where he is going to have to take on the likes of, he's going to be entering, he could be paired with somebody like a Roman Dolziz, who is a rising star like he is, or he could be given a test like a Sean Strickland, a Jack Hermanson, dare I even say a Paulo Costa or a Marvin Vittori. Is he going to be the most successful fighter in 2023? I think he might have a little hiccup or two, but I guarantee there's going to be 2 or 3 appearances, and he is going to continue to entertain. I think he's definitely going to get another major victory, just like the one he had just a few weeks ago. And I think Dricus du Plessis is going to rise up the ranks in the UFC welterweight division. I don't know if he's going to get, when you were asking about championships and such, I don't know if this is going to be the year where he captures a championship, but I guarantee over the next couple of years, he's definitely going to at least get into contender status, like high-end contender status.
I'm sorry, Tom, but I think you're buying the Dricus du Plessis hype train a little bit too much. I mean, he just beat Darren Till, who's been let's just say it like it is. He's been irrelevant in the UFC for the last 5 years. That's a fight that people should have like to Duplessis to win. You have to. I'm not sold until he beats someone that's really really good. That's like a big name. I understand you followed him since the early days of his career, and I understand you have a little bit of a soft spot for him. But I need to see him in a bigger fight first before we're talking about high contenders. And it's because I'm not buying it for a second until that happens.
All right, I respect your opinion. Most popular fighter of 2022. Now, this is one you're talking about how I have a little favoritism with that last pick. This is one where I don't have favoritism, but unfortunately, I will. This is one of those where I will bite the bullet and I will acquiesce and say it was Paddy Pimblett's year as the most popular fighter of 2022. I mean, if you saw the crowds he had for his fights, it was clear and obvious. If you see how the UFC has been pushing him, the controversy of his fight with Jared Gordon, which we'll talk about, it's pretty clear and obvious. The UFC is trying to strap a rocket to him in the same style of the rocket that was on Conor McGregor's back, his fellow countryman, back in 2014, 2015, en route to becoming the double champ. I think they're trying for a similar approach when it comes to Paddy Pimblett, just with an approach that, he doesn't overtake the UFC star in power and eventually become more than the UFC like Conor McGregor is. So I think the UFC is trying to do a Conor McGregor 2.0 just in their shape, in their image.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with any of that. My pick for most popular fighter is also Paddy Pimblett. And I will say, as much as he's gotten a lot of controversy over the last several weeks, you got to respect the fact that he's still the same personality-wise. His personality is not shut off, even with all of this, which I think it still makes you want to come back for more. Either you want to see him lose or you want to see him win. And I think 2023 is going to be interesting. And for those of you guys who can read between the lines, watch how the UFC match makes with him, because if they match make with him where he's still fighting lower ranked fighters, that's going to tell you a lot. And if he's being matched up with some of the top guys in his division, guys that you can easily think of off the top of your head that aren't even worth mentioning, just given the segment right now. But based on how they match make, it'll be very interesting to see where the UFC really stands with him. If they want him to have, I'm not going to say easy path to the title, but an easier path to gold, or if they really want him to go through the upper echelon of lightweight, because if they do, it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with him, and if they actually decide, okay, we want to push him the right way and we want him to continue to fight the best in the world.
Our next award is going to be the biggest retirement of 2022. And Zain, this is a bit of a hard one. I mean, we've lost several big names to retirement this year. Just to run through: TJ Dillashaw, Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo, Cowboy Cerrone, Joanna Champion, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Luke Rockhold can be thrown in there too, but I haven't really considered him a big star longer than you have said that Darren Till has been irrelevant in this sport. But biggest retirement in 2022. I'm gonna let you have the floor in this one first. Who did you select and why?
Yeah, I picked Jose Aldo. I mean, I've been watching Aldo since around 2011 when he had his first huge fight with Uriah Faber in Sacramento, California. And, ever since then, he's just been a model champion for the featherweight division, has fought the who's who list of the greatest fighters in the world, has fought for championships on numerous occasions, fought Conor McGregor, fought Peter Yan, has literally fought every single big name that you can think of today he's fought. And I was lucky enough to see him fight in person when he rematched Max Holloway at UFC 218 in Detroit. So I'll always have that soft spot that even though he did lose, I got to see him fight in person, and I got to see him in a pretty big rematch, so to speak, too, or at least at the time it was anyway. And he's just someone who represented his country, Brazil, well, represented the lighter weight class as well. And you had mentioned it a few weeks ago that he was really a pioneer of the lighter weight divisions, because I would agree with you. I think the big three back then in the WEC, you could easily say, were Dominic Cruz, Aldo, and Uriah Faber. I think it's pretty cool that he's amongst that group and they've all competed against one another. Well, except for Cruz and Aldo, I guess. They've all competed in the UFC at similar times, and it was just cool for him to be a part of that whole era. And he will be greatly missed in the sport. One of the good guys for sure.
For sure, Zan. I am in complete agreement with you. I also selected Jose Aldo. And I think it's not just because of all the reasons that you said. I'll add on that he also was still fighting very well and winning. Maybe not to the same degree as he was in his prime when he and Conor McGregor fought one of the biggest fights in UFC history, back at UFC 194. But then, he only had one fight this year against Merab, which it's unfortunate that was the way that he went out when it came to the UFC. But prior to that, Zen, he was on a 3-fight win streak in a weight class that he only dropped to for the sake of extending his career and trying to get another championship.
With his most impressive win being Marlon Vera, would you not agree?
Absolutely. Things looked disastrous. That loss to Marlon Moraes with the split decision, the TKO to Jan, as you mentioned, but then defeats Marlon Vera, defeats Pedro Munoz, defeats Rob Font. All of a sudden, if he had beaten Merab, I think it might be a little bit of a different story, Zan. I know it ended up being his last fight, but I think it was only his last fight out of the sake of, that he lost, and it probably finished him ever getting a championship. If he had beaten Merab, I've got a feeling that the start of 2023, we would have seen Aljamain Sterling versus Jose Aldo for the championship.
Very, very likely. Obviously we'll never know, but given that is who he beat, there's no reason why I wouldn't think that would have been a possibility. But I think it just goes to show that if you're an elite level fighter like Aldo is, age is just a number, and he proved that and more over the course of 5 to 6 years. And when everybody thought it was time for him to hang it up, he kept going and he kept proving that he was one of the best in the world. And he's without a doubt a UFC Hall of Famer. And I really hope he gets in by 2024 or 2025, because damn it, he deserves it. And he deserves it in a big way.
But then, who's also to say he's truly done? He has teased in the past few years that when he retires, he might try enter boxing. And we've seen Anderson Silva have a few professional boxing bouts. Obviously, the one with Jake Paul was something else. But I could definitely see maybe a couple of fights here and there with Jose Aldo if he so chooses to.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. For now, it looks like he's just going to take a break. But would I be down to watch Aldo box? 100%. I would, and I think a lot of people would be very interested. So,
and retirements in MMA, well, any combat sport, don't exactly seem to go hand in hand too well. And Zan,
sometimes these things happen in MMA.
Yeah, retirement. Well, I don't know who said this in the MMA media, so I apologize for not crediting you for saying this if you have. But I'm just going to say it if nobody else has. Mm-hmm. Retirement is the one thing in MMA, for those of you who know the sport well enough, it's just a word. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything, so we'll see what happens.
I feel like Dana said that at one point. I don't know. Let's just move on now, Zan, to...
he used to always say, I know what you're thinking. You used to always say, once you think of the word retirement, you should be done.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm thinking of. Robbery. Let's go to another R word. Robbery. Robbery of the year for 2022. And Zan, I think we both kind of mentioned it before, so I think we're going to be in agreement on this. Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon a couple of weeks ago. It's UFC 282. I know recency bias, but I don't think I've ever seen as loud of a response from MMA Twitter as we did with Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon.
I'm gonna blow your mind that I remember this fight, so I'm just gonna say it. But that Patty Pimblett Jared Gordon decision remind me of the pre-Twitter boom fight between Antonio Rogerio Nogueira and Jason Brills. It had similar of a reaction to where a lot of people thought that Jason Brills won 2 of the 3 rounds, as did I to this very day, 12 years later. And it just felt like that fight had eerily similar feelings. And it's not that the UFC was pushing Nogueira at the time. It was just Brills fought so well and had him in various submission attempts and all that it just reminded me of how similar kind of the vibe was in the building. And, when you look 12 years later, the fight, they're in no way similar at all. But I can say that there were 2 rounds that we've discussed on this show in this Jared Gordon fight where you and I both comprehensively said that Gordon won, and those were rounds 1 and 3. And round 2, you could have easily argued went to Pimblett. But yeah, I mean, this decision was not great in the slightest. And of course, the big scapegoat in this whole story is going to be Doug Crosby. And I think whenever people think of this fight, that's going to be the first person that they'll think of. And it's unfortunate to say that because, of course, judges are human and they make mistakes. But you can't watch that fight and not tell me that there's no way Patty Pimblett won all 3 rounds just because, based on the optics and the rules of MMA, there was not. And after that decision was read, I think you and I both knew what a robbery the year was going to be. And thankfully, we came to an agreement here because I think everybody had the same reaction that you and I did, which was what just happened and why did it happen. So,
Correct. By the way, Doug Crosby, what a character. In the interview that he did, the interview with Chael several years ago, and the one most recent. What a character! On a similar nature, Zain, we're gonna go now to the controversy of the year. Now, I put story in parentheses because I wanted to clarify for Zain and for everybody here, and even for myself. When I say controversy, I'm not talking about a robbery of sorts, a fight-ending robbery, or a judge's bad ref decision, bad judge's decision. I'm not talking about from an in the cage perspective. I am talking about an out of cage perspective, a news story that swelled up, for better or for worse, because of I can't even say for better, because it is a controversy. It is something that has taken the world by storm when it comes to something really bad in nature, or something that has split the community. Zain, I'll just give a little behind the scenes little thing here. We didn't, the staff at Fansided, when we have our little votes, like you remember for certain awards, like the ones we were listing here, we didn't even take a vote. We just, that it has to be Kraus. It has to be Kraus for the significant nature of the sport that it presented. I mean, Zain, just from an MMA Outsiders perspective, when you force one of our episodes to go 2 hours long, and part of that is because we actually have 2 guests on the show, that we dedicate a whole hour to your story and the ins and outs on it, and the effects it had on the sport already. See Toronto and see Alberta and see New Jersey, for that matter, and all the comments from Dana, all the little, investigative stuff that talks about, that talks about the effects it could have on the future of the sport, on the effects it has on something very current to sports, not just MMA, but just sports in general, like gambling and the acceptance of sports gambling, something that was, could have been considered such a, taboo thing 40, 50 years ago, when Pete Rose was banned from Major League Baseball and the Hall of Fame for it. It has to be. There's no debating James Krause.
No, none. And ultimately, the biggest loser in this whole situation is Krause himself. And I think James Lynch said it very well on his most recent edition of his MMA Q&A. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to it, I can clue you in. But someone asked Lynch about Krause and just his overall opinion of him. And James Lynch was like, I don't think James Krause is a bad person. I don't think he's a malicious person. I just think he got bad information. And because of his powerful stature as to who he is, he thought he could use it to his advantage, and it bit him in the ass. And that's exactly what happened here. And ultimately, he's the one to pay the biggest price for it.
Yeah, he will be, as I kind of said with Zaid and with you and Zaid, and I said with Adam Martin, he's going to be the sacrificial lamb. Whatever changes are going to be made, whether, there's more to this investigating, if we got to go into the judges, any other fights or fighters or fight camps, ultimately the one who is going to be the one that's made an example of is going to be James Krause.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, it'll be interesting to see where the story goes from here and what ultimately happens to Krause. Obviously, he's selling his gym. He's totally getting out of the sport.
But the story's not over.
But the story's far from over, and it'll be interesting to see, when the investigation is over, how the UFC responds to it, because if it doesn't go the way that they think it's going to go, it's going to create a black eye on the sport. And I don't know, who knows, we may have to dedicate like a month of this podcast to talking about it, but hopefully we won't have to do it. Hopefully nothing will get shut down or anything like that. But in this crazy wild west of combat sports, you just never know. So unfortunately, the Krause story is the controversial story of the year. And at this time of recording, Brandon Moreno is still scheduled to take on Davidson Figueiredo. Or that quadrilogy is still on, but yeah, a wild story that has finally come to fruition within the last month, and even weeks after the dust has settled, people are still talking about it. So,
all right, let's get into some of the fun fights and fun awards. Let's do the upset of the year. Zain, there were so many upsets this year. This was the year of the upset. You had Leon and Kamaru, Larissa Pacheco and Kayla Harrison, Alex Pereira, which you doubted me on. But what was your pick? What was your pick for upset of the year?
Yeah, this one was a no-brainer. Leon Edwards knocking out Kamaru Usman in the 5th round in August. And I mean, Tom, I gotta say, in this current I'll just disclose it. In this current space that I'm in, this is my permanent residence in Illinois. I've seen a lot of fights in this space over the course of about 15 years, not this space, but our living space. And I'll say that it is the most shocked I've been in that room watching a knockout in my entire life. I remember where I was for Sarah GSP1. I remember where I was for Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen 1. I remember where I was for all of these shocking moments in the sport. That's one that will always stick in my memory for a long time, because I'll be quite honest with you, in real time, I was bored as hell going into the 5th round. I was checking Twitter to see what people's scores were going into the 5th round, and everybody had the same score for going into the 5th round, and what have you, 39-36 or whatever it was. And yeah, I kind of was, I'll be honest, from a fan's perspective, I was a little lackadaisical and kind of didn't fall half asleep per se, but kind of took my eyes off it. And right at the moment that he was about to land the kick, I look up and I go, "Oh my goodness!" I'd be like, what? I was just like, what just happened? And then I was like, "Oh my goodness, he actually lost the title." I couldn't believe it, but it's one of those moments where I'll never forget where I was, and I literally said to myself, that has to be the craziest ending to an MMA fight that I've ever seen. And my first thought was, this is the title fight version of Mike Russo's classic knockout, also taking place on the same card as Nogueira versus Brills, where he knocked out Todd Duffy in the 3rd round after being piecemealed for the first 2 rounds. This was the championship version of that fight 13 years ago.
The one where Todd Duffy got knocked out and then his nose got booped because it was a very weak hammer fist. Yeah, that's a good one. Zain, I committed let's say, a MMA journalism sin. And basically, so how I always write stories for fights is like, I'm writing, how the fight's going, like a little bit of a running commentary. But at that point, Zain, I was writing, the headline, I was writing everything, all the different, SEO stuff, as if Kamaru Usman was going to win the fight and retain his championship. And then the kick landed. I said, "Oh, that's great." Especially because I still had a Twitter React story I had to do after that. So I'm like, "Oh, great. I have to rewrite this whole story now." But you know what? For good reason. It is something that was absolutely people did not expect. People expected that, even heading into the fight, before the fight even started, that Usman was going to win because he had dominated Edwards in their first meeting back in December 2015. People had expected that Usman was, as the fight was progressing, that Usman had every answer, that basically Leon. Now, we should have known from the start because Leon Edwards became the first man in UFC history to take down Kamaru Usman. So it's like, oh. But then after that, it's like, okay, maybe he just had his moments because Kamaru's dominating him. It's like 3 rounds. It's like 4-0 or 3-1. Usman's going to win. And I think also, for as much criticism as Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier had calling Leon Edwards on Twitter, I think commentary also helped to set this knockout, the shocking knockout up. That you have John Anik defending him, saying that is not from the cloth where he has made. And right after that line, Sam, right as that line is being said, boom, kicks him upside the head. It was painted beautifully. And I know Alex Pereira had a very similar style of finish. A few months later, it's crazy that we had at least two of these style of finishes in title fights in the same year. But I gotta go with the original, and I gotta go with the one that even I did not predict and did not see coming. So I agree with you. Leon Edwards defeating Kamaru Usman. And Zain, that just makes me more excited for 2023, where it seems like, that late March card at the O2 in London, they're going to have their trilogy fight.
For sure. I have to make one slight correction to what you said. John Anik actually said that is not the cloth from which he is cut.
He's cut. Okay, one word.
But the reason why I had to correct you was because I guess the metaphorical comparison, and if you will, just made that call that much more significant and special. And hey, I just think the coolest thing to come out of this fight, and I know it's going to sound weird, but some fan on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen it, it has millions of views. Some fan on Twitter dubbed the Rocky theme music before the 5th round and shows the kick behind the Rocky theme music, and it's one of the single greatest videos I've ever seen on the internet. I'm like, that is the definition of a real Rocky story in mixed martial arts.
For sure, absolutely stunning. Probably the biggest comeback I've seen in a title fight since Anderson Silva's first fight with Chael Sonnen. I mean, one of the bigger upsetting comebacks I've seen since Darren Elkins 2018 in Brooklyn.
Oh, that's a great one. Oh, that's so underrated. Oh, I remember where I was for that. I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings, and every single person who wasn't watching that fight, and as he saw Darren Elkins start to land a little bit, all the people who weren't interested in whatever else was on,
eyebrows were getting raised.
Turn their heads to the TV, and they're like, "What the hell is going on here?" It was crazy, and it was I don't know. I mean, I can think of several comebacks where I was in stunned silence and disbelief, but Edwards and Usman has to be up there, and the third fight is going to be absolutely electric if they can nail down that that's what London's going to be, because that's going to be big. Hopefully, Usman's hand heals up by then, but it'll be interesting.
Speaking of comeback, let's go to the comeback of the year. So, obviously, there was the, you know what, Zen? There were quite a few comebacks. Make mention of that. Make mention of Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, Jirian Glover, Drew Dober finishing Terrence McKinney, and Matt Schnell finishing Sue Miraji. I still got to go with Usman and Edwards. Just for the very same reasons that we just talked about. I have to go with Usman and Edwards. I don't know if you went with something a little different.
I did. I went with Yuri versus Glover, and I gotta admit, I think I was every single person when I saw Glover land the shots that he did and go for the guillotine. The words out of my mouth were, "What in the world is he doing?" And then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, he might actually have it." And all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, wow, he just got reversed." And then all of a sudden, like, you see the submission from the weird angle, and it's like, and he taps, and my first reaction was, what? What? Like, wait a minute, we have a new white heavyweight champion. Because that, I thought at first, before the tap actually happened, that the referee had screwed the fight up. I'm like, oh no, this is horrible. And I see the replay, and I'm like, oh wow,
He actually got it, yeah.
yeah.
Side. Definitely a good one. I have a different award for Yuri and Glover. I have a different award that I'm going to give them a little later in the show. Definitely comeback of the year though. Definitely a couple of pretty good options. Like I said, it's crazy to get comeback finishes, especially in big championship level fights that we have seen in this year. Let's talk about the moment of the year. So this would, I have to say, to describe this award, for better or for worse, a moment that will live with us throughout mixed martial arts. Now, granted, maybe not any of the ones that we've seen, like a comeback finish or anything like that. Zan, what was the moment, however, for funny, for sadness, for better, for worse, what was the moment that stuck with you throughout this year?
Yeah, there's just one kind of funny moment that really didn't have any impact on the fight whatsoever, but I think it's something that maybe 20 years from now, people won't remember who won this fight, but they'll remember this one moment in this fight, and that is Luke Rockhold down 2 rounds on the judges' scorecards in the 3rd round on top of Paulo Costa, rubbing his blood from his face onto Paulo Costa's face in one of the grossest moments I've ever seen in an MMA fight. And I gotta say, that moment right there was just as big as the hype of the fight itself, and I think it encapsulated what fans were looking for, and they got what they paid for. That's that's what I think. You wanted psychotic craziness. That's what you got.
So, Zen, I am going to have a look. I want to see. Okay, so Zen, for the one that I'm gonna do, I'm going to read it. I'm actually going to read my moments of the year, word for word. So take a little seat back. Bleeping Joe Rogan, what's up? Yo, where we at? I thought we were in New York. New York is bleeping awesome. Let's bleep and go. Joe Rogan, I want to make the question for you, man. You're the smartest person on earth, bro. I want you to focus every bleeping day, Joe Rogan. 28 days, you're going to get nine bleeps. Joe Rogan, I don't know if you know me, but I was ranked number 5 at featherweight. I was the best featherweight on the planet. I lost to my idol, Jose Aldo. It was bad for my career. I learned from my mistakes, and now I'm here to bleep and take over. I'm here to take I'm here to take over all these mother bleepers. I'm here to take over, make no mistake. I lost only to the best, but today I'm the bleeping best. Let's go, New York. Make some bleeping noise. Making mention that he took a fight on 4 days' notice against Chan Sung Jung after he was bleeping drinking beer in the streets of Brazil. Moicano doesn't give a bleep. I can beat these guys on strike. I can beat these guys on wrestling. I have to be the bleep in rankings, man. This is disrespect. I took a 5-round fight on 4 days' notice. I was bleeping drinking beer in the streets of Brazil, and they called me, and I come here. I traveled 24 hours. Mother bleepers respect me. I want the bleeping bonus. Moicano wants money. The Renato Moicano post-fight speech from UFC 281.
Well, now you have to play the actual censored version because you saying it doesn't do it justice for the way he says Moicano wants money.
And the sad part is, I turned to the normal ESPN channel for the sake of convenience because I didn't want ESPN Plus to, give me the middle finger. Reference for something a little later. So I only got the censored version. I'm like, really? And then later I had to watch the uncensored version, and the uncensored version is just the freaking best. That's probably the best. Sorry, Sam, but that's the best post-fight promo in UFC history.
Yeah, it has to be. It's right up there with hey, I'm not surprised.
Or GSP to Matt Hughes. I'm not impressed with your performance.
Yeah.
That was great. Okay, event of the year. Now, event of the year, I like what my guys at Fanside do. So we're going to split the event of the year. First, we're going to do the non-UFC event of the year, because if you just did an event of the year category, it's almost unanimous. It's going to be a UFC card. But we want to give some love to Bellator, the PFL, One Championship, and all of them. So, Zain, let's talk about a non-UFC event of the year. I think I know which one you're going to say, and I'm going to agree. I think we both are going to be in agreement because of a bias that relates to the show.
Yeah, I'm super biased. So I'm lucky enough to say that the first ever MMA event I covered as credentialed media was Bellator 288 because it took place right here in my hometown of Chicago, Illinois. We had a lot of fun with that card. We had Daniel James beating Tyrell Fortune. We had Vadim Nemkov winning his fight against Corey Anderson.
And the light heavyweight Grand Prix.
In the light heavyweight Grand Prix. We finally had closure to that. We also had Usman Nurmagomedov becoming the new man at lightweight for Bellator as well. It was a tremendous event, and an event that I'm always proud of to say was the first ever event I covered as credentialed media. And I will say, for those of you guys who are looking to get into the MMA media space, Bellator is a great way to start because they literally accredit anyone and everyone to cover their events. So even though Tom and I are really smart and we have a lot of years in the freelance MMA space, if you will, you could be starting out with your own blog, and there's a good chance that if you have a little bit of aspiration, you could easily get credentials to cover an MMA event, in Bellator or the regional circuit is the way to go. So that's my plug for that. But yes, my non-UFC event of the year is Bellator 288, and I will say with certainty that I cannot wait to go to another one of those again because I had a tremendous time. I had a great time.
Yeah, definitely have to give a shout out to Bellator. I mean, as part of Fanside, they allowed me to talk to Tyrell Fortune before his fight with Richie James. Danny Sabatello got to be the first guest on the show. We actually had a fighter interview segment. Zain, we had a whole bunch of clips that we were showing, and Zain, I think that photo of you and Usman Nurmagomedov will just forever go down, as one of the best moments of your life, one of the best moments of the show. I definitely have to say now, the PFL finals, I think definitely kept it close, but I think the fact that it was a pay-per-view card, the price of that pay-per-view, the circumstances around it, from a quality perspective, for the fights, it was fantastic. But the fact that it was a pay-per-view, PFL's first attempt, and the fact that Bellator, helped us out, helped you out a little bit. I feel like maybe with a little bit of bias, I gotta lean towards Bellator 288 over the PFL finals. Although shout out to the PFL finals, I think Fansided had selected that as the non-UFC event of the year.
Well, now that we're on the topic of MMA media, I will say, if you had an MMA Outsiders crystal ball, we're on an awards here, so we can have a little bit of fun with this.
Yeah.
If you had an MMA Outsiders crystal ball, Tom, and you and I could pick any event to be credentialed together as part of the MC the Bench podcast network and this show, which event would be a dream bucket list item where you and I would be in agreement where we would say we have to be there?
A UFC card in November. It should, as per tradition since 2016, at Madison Square Garden.
So you'd want to do another classic November card in MSG is what
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, who knows? Maybe one day that'll come true because I've done something you've never done, and you've done something that I've never done. You've actually covered a UFC press conference. I have not.
Yeah.
I've actually covered a live MMA event in person on a bigger stage. You have not, so it would be kind of a cool sentimental moment for both of us to do something that we really like to do, but actually doing it for the very first time together as a small mini tandems. Well,
sure.
That'll be a goal that when it does take place, we can't wait to be with you guys in order to do it, because I think it'll be a great milestone moment. But thank you for being in agreement with me, because Bellator 288 will always have a soft spot. It's the first event I was ever able to cover as a member of the media, so I had a great time.
Shout out Bellator. Always has treated us right. I think the MMA promotion that treats the MMA media the best. Let's go to the UFC side of things. UFC events of the year. I guess I kind of just spoiled which event, Zain, I'm going to be selecting. I have to give it to UFC 281. New UFC record for number of first-round finishes in a show. Just some absolutely crazy performances from the early prelims on. I mean, you had the early prelims topped by Matt Frevola knocking out Ahmed Azayatar. You had some impressive finishes from Ryan Spann and Aaron Blanchfield. Renato Moicano's post-fight promo. And then all 5 of the main card fights, Dan, ended in a finish. Dan Hooker breaking the spirit of Claudio Puelles. Chris Gutierrez sending Frankie Edgar into retirement. Justin Poirier and Michael Chandler having a classic. And then 2 new champions. Weili Zhang regaining the women's strawweight title. And Alex Pereira's classic comeback knockout of Israel Adesanya, becoming the first to finish Adesanya at middleweight in the UFC. And the first to just finish him in MMA overall. Proving to still be the boogeyman to Israel Adesanya's combat career. So my pick is going to be UFC 281, November of 2022, MSG.
It's a solid pick. Mine is an underrated one, and one that I think a lot of people are going to forget just because of how crazy the year was. But I'm going to go back to a classic. It was in early summer, UFC 275, a crazy card in Singapore. A lot of very exciting fights on this card. We had Weili Zhang beating Ioana and Jacek. We had a wild main event with Yuri and Glover. And then obviously we had a whole host of undercard fights that just over-delivered. That was also the same week as Road to the UFC, which is going to be exciting to see it come back next year, see how that develops into anything kind of similar to Dana White's Contender Series, but overseas. Just overall, the entire event and everything. And then, of course, Dana White's infamous reaction in his Sprinter van in Miami, watching Yuri defeat Glover, takes the cake out of everything that was that event, almost making Dana White's non-appearance at that event even better because of his instant reaction with his friends post his son's birthday party, watching that event that much better.
For sure. That was that's quite the moment. So it's like he's not there, and it's like even when he's not there, he still managed to have a react, and an oblique reaction that's certainly memorable.
And this was, and by the way, this was before Dana White did change his life from a health perspective and go to NX Health Systems. I had to was plugged in. I couldn't help it. That was the last time that we saw Dana pre second half 2022, and now he's full keto, and he looks like he's 20 years younger than he actually is. So there you go.
There you go. All right, Zain. 5 awards left. I'd say these are the big ones. Here we go. Submission of the year. We saw several big submissions, but Zain, which was yours?
That's a great question. Well, this one was hard for me to pick. I'll be quite honest with you. I mean, but I have to say it, and it's one of the craziest fights I've ever seen. Matt Schnell versus Sumajiri takes the cake for me, and watching that sequence as the fight was ending is still one of those sequences that makes me say, wow, I really love this sport. And it looked like Schnell was on the verge of losing that fight, and for him to come back and win in the way he did with the submission that he did, which was hard to do from the submission or the position that he had him in, very, very impressive.
I think that's definitely an impressive finish, then. I think Glover getting subbed by Jiri is one of the submissions of this year. However, it's not the one that I picked. I decided I had voted for that in the fan side of the awards, but I had acquiesced to what overall got picked, and I'm kind of coming around to it, Zain. I think this was PFL 5 of this year. Stevie Ray pulling off a twister submission of Anthony Pettis when Stevie Ray was on the bottom. The twister submission is one of those that you have a guy's back and you pull in one direction as his legs are going in another. He managed to do that, Zain, when Anthony Pettis was on top of him. That is something nuts that I have never seen in this sport, and I don't know we'll see ever again for a while. And Stevie Ray ends up beating Pettis, finishing him, ends up beating him in a rematch, and I think he got to the PFL finals, if I'm not mistaken.
A wild win for sure, and a crazy tournament, I might add.
For sure. Definitely something unreal. All right, we go from the submission now to the knockouts of the year. Again, I was thinking when I was doing the voting for Fansided from the Impact perspective, thinking of, Edwards and Usman again. However, I think they picked the better one, which is, hopefully you agree with me to understand, Michael Chandler knocking out Tony Ferguson with that front kick, and you just see that photo of Ferguson's face just completely monstrous like this as he drops to the canvas.
Yeah, it's one of the nastiest knockouts I've ever seen. Very reminiscent of Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort,
yeah,
but on a much more brutal level, and it's one of those knockouts that you cringe over and over and over again the more times you watch it.
All right, complete agreement on that one. Fight of the year. Zain, your selection.
Yeah, I mean, the fight of the year was tough to pick. There were a lot of great fights this year, but Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler over-delivered and then some.
It definitely lived up to the hype. However, Zain, I did hint that there was going to be a award for Glover and Jiri I was going to give, and this is going to be it. Glover versus Jiri. Fight of the year. The fact that Glover was in control for one round, and then Jiri was in control for one round, nearly finishing Glover, and then Glover nearly finished Jiri. It was nuts. But I kind of can see your point from Dustin versus Chandler for the very same reason. I do hold that fight in high regard though, because several days after that fight, I did get to meet Dustin Poirier in a Staten Island bar before.
Wild story. That's awesome. I get to meet Usman Nurmagomedov after he wins his championship, and you get to meet Dustin Poirier after he was in one of the greatest fights in the history of Madison Square Garden.
Zain, he didn't even look like, to quote my editor, your former editor, Amy Kaplan, he didn't look like he was even in a fight. It was nuts.
No, he didn't. He sure didn't.
Let's do now fighter of the year. This one we're going to split into. Again, I kind of like what Fansided does. Let's go to the women's side first. The female fighter of the year. Zan, the Fighter of the Year category for both the female and male perspective, I don't think it was as unanimous as the past few years. I don't think there was anyone who really stood out head and shoulders above everybody else. And I'm talking about, there was no clear winner. I know 2019, technically you could have debated Israel or Masvidal, but I think at least they were two head and shoulders above everybody else. This one, there wasn't really too much. Although the female fighter of the year, I think definitely Zan. There is one person, who maybe not by a big distance, but did have the best year overall, and that is Weili Zhang, pulling off the knockout of Joanna in their big rematch in Singapore, as you alluded to, sending Joanna into retirement, and then submitting Carla Esparza very easy fashion at Madison Square Garden to recapture the championship she lost as the UFC was going back into the crowds after post-COVID.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things that, it's one of those things where it looked like she was kind of down and out at one point in her career, and to see her back at this level of being the best again just goes to show how much the UFC has really tried to push the Chinese MMA market. And I think with her at the top, they're going to continue to do so. And who knows what crop of talent will come out of there, but it's very, very good to have someone represent her country the way that she does, and just the way she fights with the tenacity that, Dana's compared her, to Tyson in the past, and she does fight with that same level of energy and savagery, if you will, to where she's always looking for the finish. And she's one of my favorite fighters to watch, and someone that if you've never seen fight, you have to see her fight, because she's been in some absolute slugfests over the years. So,
and Zan, I hate doing this, but really, everybody that you would expect to be nominated for this award didn't exactly have a banner year. Amanda Nunes only fought one time, and she was fighting in the role as challenger. She had to get her belt back from Juliana Pena, who obviously lost the championship after winning it back at the end of last year. Valentina Shevchenko, very controversial decision against Talia Santos that I think you and I both agree that Talia probably won that fight and should get a rematch. Larissa Pacheco, pulled off one of the greatest upsets of this year against Kayla Harrison, but the quality of her opponents versus those in the UFC. Kayla Harrison, obviously, as I just mentioned, lost. Chris Cyborg only fought like one time and then went into boxing. And technically still the Bellator champion and is not uncontracted from Bellator, but really Weili Zhang is the one who had the year, like for the reasons that you said, that it looked like if she had lost that fight to Joanna, her career is going in a different direction and not one that you want to see.
Very true. And, it's one of those things where, the sport can change at a moment's notice. And that's exactly what, that's exactly what we were talking about, especially with, Weili beating Joanna. Joanna was one of the best in the sport at the time, and to, force her into retirement just goes to show the evolution of that division and how far it's come. And as you were saying before, Pena versus Nunes, not having the full transparent final chapter. It's going to be interesting to see if that trilogy fight ever happens again. I know you and I have debated on this before, and we're both in agreement that a trilogy should not happen just because of how dominant Nunes was in fight number 2. But given the current status of the women's divisions, don't be surprised if the UFC makes that fight, just considering the star power that still exists there. And then you want to look at it from the PFL side. Larissa Pacheco really, kind of shook up the landscape of the non-UFC women's divisions. And don't be surprised if she somehow gets magically signed to the UFC next year or in 2024, because the UFC needs more challengers. And, she can beat a girl that's the best in their promotion, which she was. I think it goes to show that the women's division is strong. You have Cyborg, Pena, Nunes, Harrison, and Pacheco. Those are some solid fighters to build around, and who knows if they all end up fighting each other similar to heavyweight boxing. But as we're starting to say now, the UFC or all these other promotions are going to continue to get in their own way. And those dream fights that I'm just breaking down probably will never happen, but I can only dream, right? So
yeah, I want to see if the UFC is eventually forced to make a Wiley versus Valentina or a Valentina versus Nunes 3, but we'll see. The only thing we could do right now is hope.
for sure.
Last one, Zain, the male fighter of the year. Again, nobody that really stands. I don't know if there's anybody that really stands head and shoulder above the rest, as compared to when Kamaru won it last year, unanimously across MMA media. 2019, Masvidal or Adesanya won it significantly across MMA media. But Zain, who was your fighter of the year?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this is one that, as you said, not a whole lot stands out. There's not a unanimous answer to this question, but I have to go with Leon Edwards, surely for the fact that it was the biggest underdog story of the year. And you got to give him the credit. He beat the best welterweight in the world, and that's all you can say. Well, I mean, he won a fight that no one gave him a chance to win, and you have to give him all the credit. And I mean, just for the sure fact of the comeback alone, I think he deserves Fighter of the Year, and he went into a level of fame that he probably never would have imagined.
For sure. He's definitely a good choice. I had been looking in the lead up to everything, Zain. Alex Volkanovski, his win over Chan Sung Jung, pretty dominant fashion, defeating Max Holloway in very dominant fashion, and now earning a lightweight championship fight at the start of 2023. I cannot wait for Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev in Australia in February. However, there is one that I have picked, that Fanside have picked, and that multiple MMA media outlets have picked. I am sticking in the comeback direction, Zain, but I'm going to go in the other direction, and I'm going to pick Alex Pereira as my fighter of the year, winning by decision.
It's a solid pick.
He had a decision win, and I think it was February or March to start the year. Then goes on and knocks out Sean Strickland in devastating fashion at 276, and then faces Israel Adesanya for the championship in MSG, UFC 281, and he ends up, falling on the scorecards and ends up getting a 5th round finish. Now, maybe not as impactful or as clear cut as the Edwards fight. There was that controversy, did the referee step in too early for Adesanya or not? But I think with the, from how we always judge the fighters of the year, going 3-0, winning a championship or retaining a championship, I think we got to go with Pereira. I think Pereira is my choice.
Solid pick. It's hard to disagree, but I think it goes to show, how much MMA opinions can sway the public, and you have to give both of those guys a lot of credit. They both had successful years, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how those two in their runs impact them going into next year and the year after. So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
There is actually one more award that I forgot to mention, but it's definitely something I wasn't exactly thinking of. I had been thinking of a while, but kind of went out of my mind. But walkout of the year, I have to give to Israel Adesanya, UFC 276, his Undertaker cosplay, where he comes out, has the urn that has Jared Cannonier's name on it, I think was absolutely legendary. And that could have gone significantly horribly wrong if Jared Cannonier had pulled off that upset. That took balls to do.
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, if you look at, if you look at kind of that whole, I guess you could say, if you look at that whole perspective, I mean, if he doesn't do that, there's a good chance that history is totally different. And it's just one of those things in MMA where sometimes the risk is worth the reward, and that's exactly what happened.
I definitely think Tai Tuivasa also had a good one coming out to Moulin Rouge at UFC Paris, before he and Cyril Gane had a very underrated heavyweight fight this year.
No doubt about it.
But that's
By the
just
way,
me with my
entrances sometimes take takes the reins over the fight. Sometimes the entrances end up being way better than the fight itself. So there you go.
I want to see the kind of entrance that Fedor is going to have for his retirement heavyweight title clash at 290 Bellator 290 with Bader on CBS.
Well, let's just hope CBS actually shows the intros this time, right?
Oh God, please. All right. Don't pull a ESPN Plus where you just turn away from the fight to show the same Burger King commercial or the same Toyo Tires commercial.
Knowing CBS, that might actually happen.
We're gonna want to see the epic final entrance of Fedor Emelianenko, and then it's gonna cut away to commercial. Whopper, 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 or whatever one of these new Burger King commercials are.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Zain, we have some games to play. Let me play your game first. It's over under.
Okay, so would you like to put the first question up on the screen and then I can read it?
Yes. Okay, here we go.
All right, Tom. So welcome to Zain's over/under / fact or fiction. Thanks again for playing. The first question that I have for you is a little bit of a fun one, and it's one that you got to ask every year because we're starting a brand new year with a clean slate, 2023. Over/under the number of new UFC champions in 2023. You're over/under and it's 6, so we'll be over 6 new champions or under 6 new UFC champions next year, and why?
Okay. Can I ask for clarification? When you say new champion, so if I think Kamaru beats Leon in the third fight, is that a new champion even though he's held the belt before?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about title change. So
yes,
I definitely see Kamaru regaining his championship. I don't know if I see Israel regaining his. I think Pereira could probably hold that role 2023, although that's debatable. So I'll say no to middleweight. Light heavyweight, I definitely see Yuri coming back and winning back his championship, so I'll put that as 2. Something's got to give at heavyweight. I don't know if Ngannou can still be inactive but keep his championship, so debating on that 3rd. Lightweight, I don't think Islam loses the title. Featherweight, well, either Islam's going to lose the title or Alex Volkanovski is going to have to give up his championship. If Volk beats Volkanovski, that could be 2 title changes in one if Volk gives up the featherweight championship. So that one's interesting, but I don't know if Volk beats Islam is the thing. Flyweight, I could see any of the women's championships. I don't know. This is tough, Zain. I might go just under. I could see 4 or 5. I don't know if I see 6.
Really? So that leads me to my next question then.
Okay.
Out of the 4 or 5, which one are you predicting is going to be a lock? What's gonna absolutely happen?
Okay. I guess since it was the only clear one, I'll put my lock as Kamaru Usman beats Leon Edwards in the trilogy.
Okay, and are you willing to make an early prediction that Kamaru Usman is going to finish Leon Edwards, or is he going to win by decision?
He's going to win by decision. He won the first fight by decision. He was on his way to win the second fight by decision. I think he wins the third by decision.
And
I think even if Leon wins, that fight ends in a decision, to be honest with you.
And is it going to be close at all?
Yes, I think it will be close.
Okay, interesting. So that's question number 1. So you're gonna go under 6 because you're saying that potentially there's gonna be 5, right?
I think, Zain, again, it all is going to come down to what happens in February in that fight between Volk and Islam. If Volk beats Islam, it could be an over, but I don't see Volk beating Islam.
I don't think very many people do either. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, Tom, next question. We're going to move over to the dark side, if you will. Over under.
Don't treat him like that.
No. I guess let me rephrase. We're gonna move over to what many fans and pundits think is the number 2 MMA promotion in the world. Some anti-UFC people, you know who you are. You think it's number 1. but but for the people who follow the sport as religiously as we do, we think of it as number 2. So my question for you, Tom, and what I think is going to be the biggest year in the history of Bellator, or you'd probably agree with that.
For sure.
Over under number of new Bellator champions in 2023. Your number is set at 4. So over under 4 new champs next year. What is it going to be?
Okay, let me go division by division again. So heavyweight, I don't see Fedor winning his final fight with Bader. I just don't.
Okay.
So
Okay.
but does Bader end up losing the title later in the year? I don't know. Bader doesn't fight. Bader doesn't fight too often, to be honest with you.
I know, but hang on a second. So you're saying what if Bader loses the title? Well, let's play hypothetical for a second.
Yeah.
Let's say Fedor wins, goes ahead with his retirement. They're going to have to put Bader in another title fight, are they not?
They
Afterward?
would. That's true. That's very true. So I could see Bader either way keeping the title in 2022. Vadim Nemkov's not losing this anytime soon.
No, not at all.
How do we with welterweight? We're gonna go with Amoslav, even though Logan Storley's in interim.
That's what I would say. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think Amoslav keeps his belt against Storley from the early perspective as of right now.
Right. Yeah.
Evelyn might. I don't know if Usman ever will. Depending on what happens. I'm gonna go under as well. I'm gonna go about 2. I'm gonna say around 2. I could see Evelyn losing his title, and I could see if Stotts gets by Patchy Mix, I could see Stotts beating maybe even Patchy Mix. I could see the Stotts Mix winner at least giving Pettis a run for his money, or even stopping Pettis for the bantamweight. I don't see.
Oh, I'm picking Mix in that fight over Stotts.
Even if Mix wins, I could see Mix beating Pettis. So I'll say bantamweight and middleweight. I don't think Liz Carmouche is going to lose the flyweight titles anytime soon.
No.
And I don't see anyone topping Chris Cyborg at featherweight. I think the only way, unless she goes to boxing and vacates.
Yeah, unless she leaves. I was gonna say. Yeah.
So, but either way, that would just be 3. So I'm gonna say just under as well for this one.
Wow, interesting. Okay, I'll mark those down. I'll mark those down mentally in my head to keep that in the back of my mind as the year goes on. So far you have 2 unders. Let's move on to question number 3.
All right, question 3 and 3A and 3B are your fact fiction questions.
Yes. All right. So I guess this question's been asked now for 3 years. It's just never been asked on this show because this show's brand new. Fact or fiction, does Jon Jones return to the UFC in 2023 for the first time since February 2020? Why or why not?
I think, Zain, I'm going to give a hot take.
Okay.
I think for the sake of the UFC and the sake of the heavyweight divisions, for the sake of the heavyweight division, pardon me, to happen. We have to have Jon Jones back. Like I said, that whole craziness with what was going on at light heavyweight, the fact that they needed another fight, that they had to move Magomed and Jan up because there was no other fight at 282. The concerns that we were having about 283 before the controversial split decision with the whole Moreno thing with Krause. I think the UFC is realizing that some of their cards, don't have the same depth to them. Now, this has been a debate we've been having about for over a decade now about the more frequent UFC cards and how some can dip in quality or some, if an injury could completely devastate it. I think for the sake of that and for the sake of just moving on with the heavyweight division, because there is going to be, for one of my questions, that I have for you, is going to be about a fight that you want to see in next year. I think we need to see that Jones and Ngannou fight. It might be a couple of years too late, but we still need to see it. I think for the sake of the heavyweight division and moving that along, because I just said I don't know how long we keep Francis on the shelf for. and for the sake of just some of these cards in general, and the sake of a question about this next individual we're going to be talking about, if he'll return, they need somebody with star power. I think for the sake of the UFC, John Jones needs to return in 2023.
Okay, I have one final follow-up question before we get to the next elephant in the room, which is pretty obvious. It's who everybody wants to know about.
Yeah.
My follow-up question to you is this: if Jones versus Ngannou takes place, will it be in March or will it be for International Fight Week in July? And why? And why for your prediction?
Zain, here's the thing: UFC is raising the price of pay-per-views to $80. You have UFC 283 that's going to take place as the second card of the UFC calendar year in mid-January. Then you've got Super Bowl weekend with Islam and Alex. Then you have a UFC card in early March in Vegas, and a UFC card a couple of weeks later, a pay-per-view card in London, which everyone's suspecting will be the trilogy between Kamaru and Leon. That early March card, for a fight fan to spend for a fight fan to spend on a pay-per-view with an $80 price tag, 3 of them in the span of like 6 weeks or 7 weeks, there's got to be something there. That the fact that it's Vegas, the fact that we haven't heard anything about this card and how close it is to the other two, something has to happen on that card. That tells me, it has to be Jones and Ngannou that they're looking at, unless they're going to do Jones versus Blades for the interim championship and have Ngannou fight the winner in July. But then that's throwing a whole wrench. What if Blades beats Jones? It's crazy to say. I don't think it would ever happen. Far from that, but something has to happen on that card. The fact that we haven't heard anything, I'm highly suspicious Jones and Ngannou is happening on that card. I say March.
Yeah, this I don't know about you, but this feels like the build-up to Chuck versus Tito 1, where people didn't know when it was going to happen, and they made Chuck versus Randy for the interim title, and people were like, what the heck is this? And then the fight actually happened, and there was no title on the line for the first one at least, and it was kind of a real downer. This feels like that exact fight over 15 years later, whereas in like this fight needs to happen and needs to happen soon. So yeah, because I don't know about you, and I don't know about myself either, but I know plenty of people are banking on making that a weekend in Vegas. So that fight needs to be made soon so people know where the hell they're going to be the weekend of March 5th.
For sure. All right, let's talk about this other guy. Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna ask you. First off, full disclosure, was lucky enough to be at Conor McGregor's last fight before he took his hiatus. Will I be at his return fight? That remains to be seen. I would be honored to see McGregor not once or twice in my lifetime, but we'll see. Which leads me to my question: does Conor McGregor return to the UFC in 2023? Fact or fiction? And if it is a fact, when do you think that is going to be a possibility?
Okay, so Zain, I think I kind of made reference to this before because I've made this reference on this show on ETB and with we were talking earlier about Paddy Pimblett. Conor McGregor is, I think, the one person that outranks the UFC. As in, Conor McGregor does not need the UFC. The UFC needs Conor McGregor. And if any more BS happens with John Jones, they're going to want Conor McGregor in the worst way. Now, Conor McGregor was obviously, he has the controversy with his whole exiting and re-entering the USADA pool. He has this whole thing that he was going for doing, he was repairing his injury from the Poirier fight that you just referenced. He's been making this Roadhouse remake movie. I could see it happening. I could see it happening around the time of International Fight Week.
Okay, so you think if he were to come back it's another IFW appearance 2 years later on the same weekend, potentially.
Probably. Either the 4 fight with Poirier or a fight with Chandler. However, Zen, here's what I'm going to say. I think International Fight Week is the deadline. I think if International Fight Week comes and goes, I don't see him headlining a Madison Square Garden card. I don't see him headlining an Abu Dhabi card. I think if July comes and goes, we don't see McGregor in 2023 and maybe not ever again in the octagon.
Well, I guess that would be lucky for me, because if that ends up being true, then I can always say that I was at his last ever MMA fight, right?
That's true. So you're probably hoping on the no.
I am hoping on the no, but if it's a yes and I have another very unique opportunity to go, I would be more than grateful. And if it happens to be with you somehow, some way, I think we would both be more than grateful to say that we were a part of at least one Conor McGregor fight. Even if that means we can't get into the building, even if that means we just go to the press conference and the weigh-in and cover the actual fight remotely, I would be more than enthralled with that too. Just as long as
or
he's
in some
back
Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, order some Buffalo Wild Wings and go to one rare casino that actually has the fight. That would be pretty cool. Or being there in the building would also work too. But I'm in agreement with you. If it doesn't happen by International Fight Week, he's not coming back this year. No way.
All right, two more over-unders.
All right, so my next question for you, we talked about it last week, and you were given the UFC Apex shits. I'm gonna ask you this again. Over under new locations for UFC events in 2023. Dana White said, quote, and I quote, I want to get back on the road. Does it happen this year, or does the UFC stay put in comfy Las Vegas?
Hold on.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God. Stop you fucking lying.
All right. Serious note, however. Again, I need clarification. When you say new locations, so they've had a UFC event in Copenhagen before, a few months before.
What I mean in a broader sense, my question means are they gonna get the hell out of Sin City for a little bit and for the foreseeable future? That way, every other weekend in June, there's not a UFC Apex card. Is what
I'm gonna hope the answer is yes, but I would not be surprised if they choose to stay comfy. Again, here's what I'll say: if by the end of the summer, end of July, same as we were talking about with McGregor, the UFC has had only like 2 fight night cards that have taken place outside of the Apex, then they're just going to stay comfy in the Apex for the foreseeable future.
Fair. So are you picking the over or the under?
I'm actually going to go positive, Zan. I'm actually going to go with the over.
Wow. Okay. Will these include stops in Long Island and Chicago?
They better.
That way we can go to our respective events, right?
They better.
Yeah, right. They better. Hey, I'm with you. Well, I think you and thousands of other people around the world are hoping for the exact same thing. But knowing how the UFC operates, yeah, it'll be like mid-July, and they'll still be sitting in the Apex somehow.
One more.
All right, Tom. This is one that I did as a tribute to you posting the picture with the IP address. So I have to ask you this question. It hasn't been asked in any other MMA podcast, so I guess we have a uniqueness factor here as you take it all in. The over-under of ESPN Plus pay-per-view outages in 2023, what will it be?
Let's pray for an under.
If you were to guess, how many times did it happen to you this year?
A few. Not as bad as the years past, but a few.
Okay.
Do you think there's ever going to come a point where, like, let's say John Jones's return or Conor McGregor's return, where you're gonna see basically ESPN Plus trending, and you're gonna see people posting that image of the X that says this video cannot be played?
Probably. It'll probably happen, and then when someone asks Dana about it, he'll be like, yeah, I don't know what the hell that means.
Probably. All right. At my end of year game, superlative predictions. In other words, basically referring to early predictions for 2023 before 2023 has even come. Before the first day of 2023 has even happened yet. So Zain,
Okay.
I will put all of these on you. All right. So my first one, very similar to how you talked about with new champions. Of the people who are currently UFC champions, who will be the first to lose their championship? And who, as a bonus point, will they lose it to?
It's a good question.
So you have my prediction already, actually. Kamaru wins the belt back from Leon. But what is going to be yours?
Okay, are we taking into account that Volkanovski is fighting Makhachev, or does that not
Yes.
count?
That counts.
Okay, because that was going to be it. I actually do think that I'm gonna say it.
You think Volk's winning?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
Wow.
I'm gonna say it right here, right now, on December 27th, that I think Alexander Volkanovski is gonna go. Well, not enemy territory because he's fighting at home, but Alexander Volkanovski is gonna win at home and shock the world and beat the incomparable Islam Makhachev and shock the world.
My God. What a bold prediction, Zain. I like it.
There you go.
I was looking to see who would be brave enough. And you're brave enough.
Not only that, Alexander Volkanovski to win in the 4th round by TKO, write it down.
You think he finishes him?
There you go.
Okay, let me follow up, Zain. Follow up. Is he gonna follow the path of Conor and Daniel and the male champions? And if he becomes a champ, is he vacating the lower title? Is he gonna vacate the featherweight title?
No, I think he's gonna take a risk and try to go up and down because I think Dana likes him enough to where he can do whatever he wants.
Okay, fair enough. Second question, Zain. A fighter that no one might expect to become champion in their promotion 2023. So if you want to mention, I say in their promotion. So if you want to stretch this out to Bellator, PFL, One Championship, KSW, be my guest.
Oh wow. Okay. This is a little bit of a deeper one. I'll be honest with you. I gotta think for a little bit. But if I were to guess, my first instinct is to actually say that I think that Tai Tuivasa is a real shot.
Do you think Tai Tuivasa beats Francis Ngannou?
I think he gives him a great fight. I really do.
Do you think Tai Tuivasa? Okay. If it's John Jones who is the heavyweight champion, does he give John Jones a run for his money?
I'll say this: anything is possible. All it takes is one punch, my guy.
Okay. Hold on. If somehow, some way, Curtis Blades is the heavyweight champion, that one I'm actually gonna say yes. Tai Tuivasa beats him.
I actually think that Curtis Blades would out wrestle him and win that fight.
I love how we went in completely different directions to that one. Zain, I think that calls for this.
Sometimes these things happen in MMA.
Thank you, Gus Johnson.
Hey,
all right.
You told me. Hey, I took it as an out of left field question, so I had to give you. I had to give you an out of left field answer.
Fair enough. Okay. Like you, I have a 3A. Like you, I have a 3A, 3B.
Okay.
Fighter who will have the biggest fall in 2023.
Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot on this one.
I hate to admit it because I really like him. but I have to go with Sean. I have to go with Sean O'Malley.
Ooh. He's definitely a possibility.
He is, because a lot of people thought he lost to Peter Yan in Abu Dhabi, which I thought he did.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, Tom, I was there at his fight against Chris Moutinho. You cannot tell me.
Moutinho gave him a run.
He did, but you can't tell me with a straight face that Sean O'Malley has fought some of the best fighters in the world outside of Marlon Vera and Yan, outside of those two fighters. Who's he beat? That's my question. He hasn't beat anyone that's like a real.
I think Munoz is still owed a rematch after that no contest.
Interesting. You think he can win that fight?
O'Malley? I think it's possible. I think Munoz has a possibility himself. Do I think O'Malley's beating the Aljamain Sterling? Hell no.
No, absolutely not.
Let's see. Do you think Israel Adesanya is going to rebound after losing to Pereira?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think so. I think Usman will rebound after after losing to Leon. I think Kayla Harrison will have a rebound some way.
Do you think she'll fight Pacheco again, or probably not?
I could definitely see that they want to do more UFC PFL pay-per-views. I could see a PFL next PFL pay-per-view being headlined by a quadrilogy between the two.
Yeah, but unfortunately, if that card isn't stacked, who's going to buy it, right?
That's true. Well, we don't even know the numbers for this first card, so
no, we don't, and we may never know.
True, because that's ESPN Plus for you. 3B, biggest rise. So you said Rosas Jr. was the one you were looking at as the one to watch in 2023. Do you think he will have the biggest rise, or do you think there's somebody who will have a bigger rise, a Jorge Masvidal style like push in 19 or something?
Terrence McKinney.
Ooh, I like that one. I like that one a lot.
I like the way he fights. I like the way he gets on the mic. He always delivers great performances. He has a few good quality wins in the UFC. I think he has a chance to break the top 10 if things fall the right way. I really do.
I love that one, Zain. I love it. Okay. Which promotion will be the best in 2023? We didn't go do a promotion of the year category here, but I think it's pretty fair to say, Zain, UFC. Yeah, they're always the default, but they blew everybody out of the water this year.
Yeah, I think I would be a goofball to say that it's anything but the UFC, because it will be the UFC. Even if the fight night cards are still subpar, they're still going to be the best.
All right, so you're going to say 22 and 23 UFC.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right, last but not least, Zain. I kind of made reference to this before because I said Jones and Ngannou was it for me. But Zain, what for you is the fight you most want to see happen in 2023?
Oh, this is a good question.
It's the last one.
Wow. Okay. I was gonna say an answer, but I knew it wouldn't make sense because he said several times he'll never come back. I'm gonna say the biggest fight that needs to happen in 2023. Does this have to be MMA related, or can it be boxing too?
I didn't think of a boxing one. If you want to give a boxing one, go ahead. I was thinking more MMA though. So if you want to give two answers, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you two.
Okay.
First one is pretty simple on the boxing side: Earl Spence versus Terrence Crawford.
Big time, yes, big time. I'll agree with you on that one.
It has to happen. I don't care if it happens. Well, it won't happen New Year's Day, but I don't care if it happens July 25th or December 30th. The fight needs to happen. Just tell me a date, and I will see it. I will write it down. I will circle it. I won't miss it. Yeah.
I side with you on that. An undisputed welterweight title fight between those two, or an undisputed heavyweight title fight between Usyk and Fury. I think both of those are ones I need to see.
I mean, you don't think Usyk versus Fury will happen in Saudi Arabia the week after the Super Bowl?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You don't think Usyk versus Fury will happen in February, as it's rumored to happen?
No, because of the WBA, of course, making Dubois the mandatory challenger.
Oh, that's true. Oh my goodness, how could I forget that? Right?
Because the WBA always has to screw everything up.
Of course. Yeah. So I will go with that for the boxing side. For the MMA side, I'm in unanimous agreement with you. Francis versus Jones. Make the fight. Allow both of them to make millions of dollars. Put it in Vegas and call it a day.
For
That's
sure.
That's what I think.
I love it. All right. That is 2022 in mixed martial arts. Zain, thank you for doing this with me. This is absolutely fun. Thank you all for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell. Get everything for Empty the Bench and more. As I mentioned, next week, Zain and I are going to be off. We will return, however, the second week of the new year. So we're going to around January 9th, January 10th.
Yep.
To recap the Bellator Rising card that happens on New Year's and preview the first UFC card of the year, UFC Vegas 67. Make sure to follow the show across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB. Make sure to follow the network across social media at ETB Network. Follow Zain at Bando99. You can find his work at bjpen.com. Follow me at Thomas J. Albano and Tom Talk Sports 9. You can follow my work over at Bandsided MMA. So, Zain, toast to 2022. Here's to an even better 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. For Zain Bando, I'm Tom Albano. My New Year's resolution, Zain, is to be Joe Piper.
Yeah, my New Year's resolution as well is to be Joe Piper, and hopefully by 2025 or 2026, we will be interviewing said new UFC champion, Joe Piper, and to tell him that this show has always and will forever be dedicated to the man himself.
Perfect. All right. For Zain, I'm Tom. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you in 2023. Take care.
Happy New Year, everyone, and likewise, Tom. It was a pleasure doing this with you, and I look forward to doing it more often over the course of the next year. And thank you again. Yeah, absolutely.